Dear listeners, feel the real fear with us. Horror stories from all over the country and abroad. Those who have been, are being, or will be involved in today's episode, greetings and love to everyone. I hope everyone is well and healthy. Like every episode, I am with you all to present the event you sent. The first story was shared by Michael, who heard it from someone at his office. For certain reasons, the name of the person cannot be disclosed, as they didn't want their name revealed. The story involves a man named John, who was an ambulance driver. Michael heard this story from John, and it's a rather unique one. John himself witnessed most of the events firsthand, while some details were heard from others later. The incident took place with the body of a 15-year-old girl. Now let's dive into the main story. The time was around 1996. It had been raining all day, and by evening, the rain was still pouring down. In the middle of this rainstorm, John was parked with his ambulance outside Harvard Medical School. The weather was terrible, and as John waited in the ambulance, two men in their mid-20s to early 30s approached him. They told John that they needed to transport a body from Alabama to Alaska. Usually, John charged a higher fee for such trips, but due to the circumstances, he agreed to take the job for a lower price. The two men, who were brothers, asked John to help transport their sister's body. The roads were mostly deserted because of the rain, and they drove to a quiet, isolated house in Alabama. When they arrived at the house, John noticed that the place was usually empty. Typically, when someone passes away, there are more people around, but there were only about 4 or 5 individuals in total, which John found strange. However, he didn't dwell on it much, figuring that people in Los Angeles didn't mix together as they do in villages. So it wasn't odd that no one was around. The two brothers then asked John to bring the ambulance inside the house. John drove the ambulance as close as he could, and the two brothers, along with two women and a middle-aged man, loaded the body into the vehicle. Afterward, the brothers asked John to drive the ambulance. By this time, it was around 10 p.m. As John drove, the two brothers sat in the back of the ambulance with their sister's body. They were silent and didn't say much, with everyone looking sad. As the ambulance traveled, it began to rain again, and the roads were empty. The journey took them through California, and it was here that strange things started to happen. As the ambulance passed through California and entered a field, John noticed something bizarre. On one side of the road, he saw a long line of massive dogs walking in a single file, much like ants marching in a line. These dogs were enormous, about 45 times the size of a regular white dog. Each dog had an iron chain around its neck, connected to the next dog in the line. John sped up the ambulance when he saw something ahead in the ambulance lights. As the dogs approached the ambulance head-on, the two brothers who were with the body began reciting prayers and verses that they knew. About 150 to 20 dogs silently crossed the road, passing in front of the ambulance. The ambulance stopped as the dogs crossed. When the last of the dogs passed, a tall man in black clothes appeared, holding the chain that bound the dogs. The man's face wasn't visible, but he was unnaturally tall. Afterward, the ambulance started moving again and passed them by. After that, neither the dogs nor the man could be seen. At first, John didn't realize what had just happened, but shortly afterward, he understood that this might have been something supernatural. When he saw the man, who was over 10 feet tall, it became clear that this wasn't a normal person. And so many dogs, all the chains tied to the same thread, moved so orderly it wasn't normal. Dogs like this should be a little disorganized, but this moved perfectly in line. These thoughts hit him afterward. Anyway, he sped up the ambulance a bit more. A while later, John saw the dogs running along the road, matching the ambulance speed. making strange noises as if they were trying to speak some unknown language. The 150 to 200 dogs were running at the same pace as the ambulance, their eyes red and full of rage, as though they were about to break the ambulance apart. John saw them clearly through the rear view mirror. As an ambulance driver, John had experienced a few odd occurrences, but nothing as terrifying as these. However, John was a respected cleric who followed advice he had been given. A respected cleric had once told him that if he ever sensed that something bad was following the ambulance because of a body, he should have one of the passengers touch the body. Remembering this, John told the two brothers to hold on to their sister's body. They did as he instructed. Immediately the dogs moved to the side and the 10-foot tall human-like figure behind them began trying to hit the vehicle, but for some reason couldn't. The two brothers could see what was happening behind them as they approached Daulatpur. John tried to drive as fast as possible, but it felt like the vehicle wasn't moving forward. Meanwhile, nothing passed in front of the ambulance, nor did any vehicle appear behind it. After some time, they saw a light ahead, and John realized it might be a truck's lights. When he looked behind, there was nothing. Feeling some relief, John and the two brothers calmed down. John told them that such strange things could happen with a body in the car, but the worst had passed when they overtook the truck. Shortly after, they entered a field with farmland on both sides of the road and saw hundreds of crows flying around the vehicle. The sound of the crows was unlike any typical cawing. The brothers and John understood that the danger hadn't left them yet. It sounded as though the crows were trying to speak in about 20 different languages. The sound was similar to what they had heard from the dogs earlier. Though it wasn't raining anymore, it had rained earlier that evening, and the road was slippery, so John couldn't drive too fast, even if he wanted to. John reassured the brothers not to worry and that by God's will nothing bad would happen. The crows surrounded the vehicles so much that they couldn't see anything outside. The crows blocked the light from the vehicle's headlights. After a while, the crows flew up towards the jungle on the other side of the field. A few minutes later, they spotted a wooden shop by the roadside, which wasn't part of the market but located near a pond just outside the village. The ambulance stopped in front of the shop. John and the two brothers got out. John went to the shop, bought cigarettes, and had some biscuits and tea. The two brothers sat by the shop but didn't eat anything, even when John offered them some food. John asked the shopkeeper, "Why is your shop open so late night?" The shopkeeper replied that his main job was to guard the pond nearby, and he earned some extra income by running the shop at night. Many truck drivers stopped there as well as other vehicles, and people would have tea, rest for a while, and it generated good business. He didn't just sell tea, he also sold hot milk. The reason was that by that time people's energy levels dropped and they felt sleepy, so many didn't want tea but preferred hot milk. That's why he sold hot milk too. So mainly they had no hot milk and the weather was quite bad, so there weren't many vehicles on the road. The shopkeeper was explaining all this while talking to John, and meanwhile one of the two brothers went near the ambulance and suddenly screamed. Hearing the scream, the other brother and the shopkeeper rushed over there. When they arrived, they were shocked. The corpse in the ambulance was gone. The two brothers started frantically searching for the body, along with the ambulance driver. At one point, the younger brother screamed near the pond and jumped in. Seeing this, the driver, the shopkeeper, and everyone else went near the pond and saw that the body was floating just above the water in the middle of the pond. However, it wasn't clearly visible, as if it was hovering slightly above the water. The young brother tried to swim toward the body, and seeing this, the elder brother also jumped into the pond. But as the two brothers got close to the body, it suddenly moved to the other side of the pond. Again, the two brothers swam toward it, and just like before, the body floated to another part of the pond. Seeing this, the shopkeeper asked the driver, "What's going on?" The driver then explained everything that had happened on their way back with the body. The shopkeeper then told the two brothers urgently, "You need to get out of the water quickly, or you will be in danger." The two brothers didn't want to leave their sister's body like that, but the shopkeeper reassured them, "Nothing will happen to the body, but if you don't come out now, something bad will happen to you." After a lot of convincing, the two brothers finally got out of the water. Then the shopkeeper started lighting fires around the pond using dry wood and bamboo. After they got out, the shopkeeper told them, "Now you have to wait patiently. A scholar passes through here in the middle of the night. He performs the Tahajjud prayers and leads the local mosque. He is a very pious man and can help with these matters." The shopkeepers and Meher Ali explained to the brothers that they needed to wait. Meanwhile, the body, it continued floating back and forth across the pond. It wasn't walking, but it looked like it was gliding on the water, floating from one side to the other as if carried by the wind. The shopkeeper kept lighting more fires around the pond with whatever dry wood he could find. At around 2 a.m., a respected cleric came by on a bicycle. The shopkeeper stopped him, and they all explained what had happened during the night, with the two brothers crying desperately. They begged, "Please help us retrieve our sister's body from the pond." The elder brother pleaded, and the younger brother also joined in. The cleric listened to everything and then asked them, "How did your sister die? Tell me the truth, don't lie." Fearfully, the two brothers revealed everything. They said a horrible black magic curse was placed on our sister, and she killed herself to escape that torment. The cleric then said, "Tell me the whole story." The elder brother began explaining. "It all started 3 years ago, near the marsh beside our house. My younger sister would go there every morning to pick lotus flowers. Since the marsh was so close to home and she grew up there, it was normal for her to go and pick flowers or catch fish. There were many palm and date trees around the marsh. One day, my mother told my sister, if you are going to pick flowers in the morning, look under the palm trees to see if there are any ripe palm fruits. Listening to our mother, she went out to the marsh late at night, first looking for palm fruits under the trees, but she couldn't find any. Then she entered the marsh and began collecting flowers. At one point, she heard the sound of palm fruits falling nearby. She came out of the water and went toward the palm tree, where she found a bunch of fruits lying on the ground. But just moments earlier, she had seen that there were no fruits under the tree. She began gathering the fruits into one place when he noticed a tall man dressed in black also arranging the fruits the same way she was. Seeing the man, my sister asked, "Who are you?" Then from nearby, the figure replied, "I'm gathering these fruits for you. From now on, come here every day and take them." Hearing this, my sister said, "Let me see your face. I don't recognize you. Let me see if I know you." After she said this, the figure didn't reply but started climbing up the palm tree like a human. Seeing this, my sister got scared and ran straight home, where she told us everything. We scolded her for going to the marsh alone so late at night. We were told about what happened, and then we scolded my sister, asking why she went out so late at night. At that moment, I thought she must have believed that it was already morning. Anyway, after hearing my sister's account, we went to the edge of the pond under the palm tree to check. We found a lot of palm fruits had fallen, but the odd part was that they were mostly half-ripe. Normally, half-ripe fruits don't fall from the tree. About 30 of them had fallen, but the person my sister saw was nowhere to be found. And despite looking carefully, we couldn't find the tree she said had grown. After this, we returned home. Everything continued as normal. After 4 months later, in the middle of the night, my sister, thinking it was morning, went out again to pick flowers. While picking flowers near the bank, she ventured a little deeper into the water. Suddenly, she saw the same tall, black-clad figure holding a bunch of flowers standing in the middle of the pond. He was calling her, inviting her to take the flowers, but she couldn't see his face. Upon seeing this, she quickly turned around and tried to leave the pond with the water lilies she had. As she was heading back, something underwater rushed toward her. Something hit her hard under her foot. She managed to leave the pond and return home. When she arrived, she saw that her ankle was bleeding. She called her mother and explained everything that had happened. Her mother scolded her again. "Why did you go outside in the middle of the night again?" Then her mother wrapped the wound with cloth, and the family gave strict orders not to go out again to pick flowers or gather palm fruits. Over time, her body began to wither away. One night, she disappeared from bed. After searching, we found her unconscious under the. We brought her home, and when she regained consciousness, we asked why she went there, but she couldn't explain anything. She insisted she was asleep at home and didn't believe she had been found near the tree. Her condition continued to deteriorate. Doctors and jinn masters were consulted, but none of it helped. This continued for some time. One night, my younger brother woke up and saw our little sister walking alone towards the pond. He called out to her, but she didn't respond. As she neared the palm tree, we ran toward her and grabbed her. She immediately fainted. At that moment, we noticed a large black dog walking across the pond toward the jungle. Our shouting brought our parents outside. Together, we carried her home. We all realized that something malevolent had latched onto her. The next day, we took her to a well-known jinn master. He listened to the whole story, performed some rituals, gave her some blessed oil and water, and asked us to return in a week. When we went back, he told us, "This girl has fallen into the clutches of a tantric pishacha. Pishacha controls many evil jinn. It has cast black magic on her using her blood. When she was cut in the pond, the pishacha took a few drops of her blood using its sharp claws, which it then used for black magic. The jinn master said that it wasn't possible to cure her with ordinary treatments and advised us to take her to a more powerful jinn master. If possible, he suggested sending her far away. So she was sent to Los Angeles for a year to stay at my uncle's house. My mother and I also stayed there to look after her. Though there were moments of improvement, things often got worse. My sister used to say death would be better than this suffering. Today, unable to bear the pain any longer, she hanged herself. We are taking her body home quietly to avoid any trouble. But now, it feels like the entity is still following us even after my sister's death. The respected cleric listened to everything we said. Everyone was paying close attention, but the cleric was listening even more carefully. After a while, we asked the shopkeeper for a glass of water. When the shopkeeper handed him the glass, he recited a prayer over the water and threw it into the pond. The cleric then stood alone by the pond, seemingly talking to someone invisible. After some time, the body floated on its own to the edge of the pond and then drifted toward the ambulance. The cleric explained that one of his helpers had brought the body. He instructed us to place my brother in the ambulance. He instructed us to place my brother in the ambulance and said to the Pishacha, "This evil entity has cast powerful black magic on your sister using my many jinn under. Numerous jinn are assigned to this. Even after the body is buried, they can take it from the grave during the first night. A method was arranged for this. After the burial, your local respected cleric and others stood guard over the grave. If the first night passes, inshallah, they won't be able to do anything. However, the first night might cause problems. The body shouldn't be moved from here until the Fajr Azan. The body shouldn't be moved from here until the Fajr Azan. Leave it as it is. And after the Azan, you can proceed." There were tears, and the body was transported to the village. The respected cleric was requested to help, and he agreed. He sat beside the driver in the ambulance. He was the Imam of the mosque. After leading the Fajr prayer, he set up. Anyway, around 1 o'clock, they arrived. The cleric was present the entire time during the burial. For the first night, when guarding the grave, he performed some rituals for protection and selected people to guard the grave, ensuring them that they wouldn't be harmed. He said that some good forces would accompany them and to trust in Allah. They should begin their task after reciting the words of Allah. Inshallah, no harmful jinn would be able to hurt them. At that time, many people bravely came forward to guard the grave. Each person who came received a prayer and blessing from the respected cleric. Then there was John, the driver. That man didn't stay until late in the night. After the body was buried, he departed with the cleric. A few days later, John returned to the village where the body had been buried in the yard of the two brothers' house. Upon returning, John met the two brothers and asked if anything had happened that night. The brothers said, "We, along with 15 others from the village, stayed to guard the grave. There had been rain since the evening, and around 11 o'clock, the storm, rain, and thunder intensified. The people in the village became afraid, and many left, but we couldn't abandon our sister's grave in this danger. We spent the entire night by the grave reciting prayers. Deep into the night, we saw long, shadowy dogs around the grave, their necks chained. Behind them were older figures. We sensed the presence of some benevolent entities. We felt that the good forces were trying to drive the evil spirits away. The evil entities, in their anger, snapped large branches from distant trees, but for some reason they couldn't approach the grave. By 1 o'clock, everything became calm again, and after that, nothing bad happened. By Allah's mercy, it ended peacefully. That was the story that came to light. The truth is, there are countless incidents associated with the ambulances. Some stories become known while others remain untold. Not everyone reveals what happens. Many ambulance drivers experience terrifying incidents. One such story, which I myself witnessed, occurred recently. It involved a close relative of mine who passed away on January 6 of this year. After the death, we had to transport the body, but it was the day before the election. So there were no vehicles on the roads. Nothing was available. In that situation, the police ambulance arrived from the police lines and the body was transported in that ambulance. I was in a different van while we were going, but on the way back, I sat in the ambulance. The roads were deserted except for police patrols because of the election. Since it was a police ambulance, no one stopped it. At one point, the driver, a police constable, stopped the vehicle and said, "Brother, there seems to be a problem." While driving, it feels like something is holding my hand and trying to steer the front tire into the ditch on the left side. He said it felt like there was pressure on his hand. After stopping the vehicle, he pulled over near a tea stall and we had some tea. Soon after, several patrol officers arrived as we were new faces there. Once they realized it was a police ambulance, they asked a few questions and then left. I heard the driver's story firsthand while sitting in the ambulance on the night of January 6. You can understand that this wasn't long ago. It was an unsettling experience, but I personally witnessed it while riding in the ambulance. And I felt like 112 when suddenly, for no reason, the ambulance, and I felt like 112 when suddenly, for no reason, the ambulance went a little to the side of the road. Initially, when the steering was turned properly to the left, everything seemed normal. But after it happened twice, he stopped the car. However, for the rest of the journey, there were no more problems. Alhamdulillah, this was something I witnessed myself and I have shared the date and details as it happened. By Allah's mercy, nothing bad happened during the trip, Alhamdulillah. The fact is that many incidents occur with ambulances, either with the people who drive them or those inside them. Those present at the time can understand how dangerous it is if something goes even slightly wrong. The vehicle could end up in a terrible accident. May Allah protect us from such dangers and may He safeguard us all.